They had come to Lake Tahoe for a typical vacation, but that night the two friends disappeared, and their car was left empty. For 3 years, the case remained unsolved. But a single discovery near the lake changed everything. What the water had been hiding forced investigators to reopen the case, and now they had to find out what really happened to Madison Bennett and Ashley Mills that night. Some names and details in this story have been changed for the purpose of anonymity and confidentiality. Not all photos were taken at the scene. The trip to Lake Tahoe began early in the morning when 23-year-old Madison Bennett and her 22-year-old friend Ashley Mills left the suburbs of Sacramento. Their destination was the parking lot near Eagle Falls Trail, where they planned to arrive by 9 a.m. Before the trip, Madison sent her mother a message detailing her plans, unaware that this would become one of the last leads in the case. Madison had just graduated from college and was preparing to attend law school. Friends described her as a responsible and disciplined person who planned her time well in advance. Ashley Mills worked at a veterinary clinic and had also notified her supervisors in advance about her trip. At 8:40 a.m., security cameras at a gas station near South Lake Tahoe captured Madison's black SUV. The girls bought several bottles of drinking water, energy bars, and maps. During questioning, the gas station attendant confirmed that they appeared calm and asked about the condition of the trail near Emerald Bay. No signs of distress or the presence of any suspicious individuals were observed. At 9:15 a.m., the Madison SUV pulled into the parking area near the start of the Eagle Falls Trail. This is confirmed by a recording from the automated entry logging system at the El Dorado National Forest. The ranger on duty reported that the air temperature was 65 degrees Fahrenheit. The girls parked their car near a large information sign with a map of the trails. According to the investigation's reconstruction, Madison and Ashley planned to take the traditional route along the canyon and descend to the shore in the evening. The Eagle Falls Trail winds through dense coniferous forests, where tall pine trees cast continuous shade and rocky terraces alternate with steep ascents. There are many unofficial side trails in this area that lead to isolated rocky outcrops. At 11:30 a.m., a couple of hikers from Nevada encountered Madison and Ashley half a mile from the lower waterfall. The witness stated during questioning that the girls were resting, taking photos of the scenery, and asking about the condition of the trail leading to the upper lakes. They were carrying light backpacks and had hiking poles. This testimony marked the last confirmed contact with the victims on the main hiking trail. At 6:40 p.m., a local fisherman spotted two young women near an old wooden pier. In his statement to the police, the man emphasized that the girls were sitting at the edge of the pier and talking calmly. At that moment, twilight was already falling over the lake. The man noted that he did not notice any suspicious details or other people nearby. After 7 p.m., the girls' digital trail disappeared completely. At 7:20 p.m., Ashley Mills's phone sent its last data packet to a cell tower in the Rubicon Point area, after which the device shut down. Madison Bennett's phone had stopped transmitting a signal as early as 6:15 p.m. Concerns arose the following day, July 25th. Madison was supposed to call her mother at 10 a.m. When the girls still hadn't returned home by 11 p.m., Madison's father filed an official missing persons report with the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office. The search operation began on July 26th at 6 a.m. Madison's SUV was found in the parking lot. The vehicle was locked, and there were no signs of damage to the locks or windows. Upon inspecting the interior, officers found the girls' personal belongings: purses containing documents, cash, bank cards, a spare set of keys, and cell phones. No one leaves all their communication devices and documents in a locked car before a long hike. The search operation involved personnel from the Sheriff's Department, Rangers, 3 K-9 teams, and more than 40 volunteers. Over the course of 2 days, rescuers searched more than 20 miles of trails. Search dogs picked up the girls' scent near the parking lot, But after just a few hundred yards where the terrain changed to granite slabs, the trail disappeared completely. On the afternoon of July 27th, a helicopter and divers were brought in to assist with the search. Divers searched the shallow waters of Emerald Bay and the coastal areas around the old pier, but found no belongings. The helicopter made more than 15 flyovers, but the dense tree canopy made it impossible to survey the undergrowth. Investigators interviewed more than 50 people who were in the Eagle Falls Trail area on July 24th. No witnesses, other than the couple and the fishermen, provided any additional information. No one heard cries for help or sounds of a struggle. On July 29th, a second search of the area around the old pier was conducted. No signs of a struggle, blood, or lost items were found. 2 people had simply vanished from the shoreline, leaving no evidence behind. After 3 weeks of fruitless searches, the Sheriff's Department announced it was scaling back the operation. The case of Madison Bennett and Ashley Mills was reclassified as a missing under unexplained circumstances case. The girls' parents hired private investigators on their own, distributed thousands of missing person flyers, and organized private search parties. Yet the silence around Lake Tahoe remained complete. Months passed. The summer season gave way to autumn rains, and later to snowfalls that covered the canyon slopes with a thick layer of ice. Answers to the question of what exactly happened to the girls on the evening of July 24, 2015, never emerged. Years have passed since the disappearance of Madison Bennett and Ashley Mills, but the case has remained unsolved. The Emerald Bay area, where the search was last concentrated, has gradually returned to normal life. It seemed that all possible leads had long since been lost. But one change brought about by nature has once again drawn attention to this story. According to data from the South Lake Tahoe Weather Station, the average temperature in July was 7 degrees Fahrenheit above normal, and the water level in Lake Tahoe dropped nearly 4 feet below the long-term average due to a prolonged lack of rainfall. In many shallow areas, sandbars and old wooden structures, which had remained hidden beneath the water for decades, were exposed. On August 12, 2018, at approximately 11:30 a.m., 2 local fishermen were surveying a shallow area near an old submerged fishing shack located 300 yards from the old pier. Amid the silt and half-decayed wooden pilings, the men spotted an object they initially mistook for the remains of camping gear. However, upon approaching closer in their boat, they discovered skeletal human remains wedged between the structure's lower beams beneath a layer of river sand. At 11:50 a.m., a witness called the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department hotline. Within half an hour, a response team, a forensic medical examiner, and divers arrived at the scene. The area around the old fishing shack was immediately cordoned off with yellow tape, and access to the cove by civilian watercraft was blocked. An initial examination confirmed that the remains had been underwater for a long time. Some fragments of synthetic clothing remained on the remains. Divers recovered bone fragments, damaged footwear, and part of a metal buckle from a backpack. The official evidence collection report noted that the remains were covered by heavy wooden sections of the sunken hull, which prevented them from moving freely with the currents. On August 13, 2018, the remains were transported to the state's Forensic Medical Laboratory in Sacramento. Visual identification proved completely impossible. Experts extracted DNA from the bone tissue to compare it with samples provided by the parents of the missing girls in 2015. On August 18, 2018, at 2 p.m., the laboratory released its official conclusion. The DNA profile of the recovered remains matched exactly with the samples provided by Madison Bennett's mother. The analysis confirmed that the remains belonged to Madison, who went missing on July 24, 2015. For Madison's family, this news marked a painful end to 3 years of uncertainty. Since her daughter's disappearance, her mother had kept her daughter's room exactly as it was. Textbooks, class notes, and personal belongings remained on her desk. In an affidavit, The girl's mother stated that she had kept the room untouched because it remained her only connection to her daughter's life. For 3 years, Madison's father traveled to Lake Tahoe every week, checked information from anonymous tipsters, and personally searched the lakeside areas. The official confirmation of their daughter's death shattered the family's last hopes, but it allowed them to proceed with the funeral arrangements. Receiving the medical examiner's report radically changed the legal status of the investigation. The missing persons case was reclassified as an investigation into a suspected violent death. The 2015 case files were retrieved from the archives and transferred to the Major Crimes Unit of the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department. Detectives began by thoroughly reviewing all interview transcripts, video recordings, and phone records. Investigators paid particular attention to the location of the discovery. The old fishing shack was located 200 yards from the spot where, in 2015, a fisherman had seen the girls on the pier. In the initial report, this structure was mentioned only in passing, as it was completely submerged in water at the time. Detectives re-interviewed people who had been in the Eagle Falls Trail area on July 24, 2015. Officers cross-checked witness statements for inconsistencies. They re-interviewed gas station employees, witnesses along the route, and the fisherman who saw the girls at 6:40 p.m. Forensic medical expert Richard Wayne noted in a report dated August 20, 2018, that microscopic deformities were found on the victim's ribs and forearm that were not consistent with the effects of being in the water. The nature of the injuries suggested that mechanical trauma may have been inflicted shortly before the body entered the water. A dive team conducted a second search of the riverbed near the fishing cabin. The specialists used metal detectors and bottom scanners. Several more small metal objects were found on the bottom and sent for forensic analysis to determine whether they belonged to Madison or Ashley. The discovery of Madison Bennett's remains brought the main question into sharper focus. If Madison died and ended up under the submerged structure, then what happened to Ashley Mills? No remains or belongings of the second girl were found near the fishing shack. Investigators once again reconstructed the chronological sequence of events from the evening of July 24, 2015. Both friends were together near the pier at 6:40 p.m. However, only one girl's remains were found in the water. The disappearance of the two young women no longer appeared to be an accident. The presence of a body in a hard-to-reach submerged structure suggested the possible involvement of an outsider who knew the area. Finding the answer to the question of what happened to Ashley Mills became the top priority for the investigative team. The official identification of Madison Bennett in August 2018 completely changed the direction of the investigation. Now, investigators from the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department had a specific starting point, a flooded fishing shack near the old pier at Emerald Bay. The discovery raised numerous questions. Why were the girls' remains found in this particular location? Was it the result of an accident or a deliberate attempt to hide the body? And most importantly, who was with Madison and Ashley during their final hours? The first step taken by the revamped investigative team, led by detectives from the Major Crimes Unit, was a thorough re-examination of the archives from 2015. Experience had shown that cold case files often concealed details that had not been given due consideration during the initial investigation. The detectives retrieved the transcripts of the initial interviews, route maps, vehicle registration data, and all digital traces that had been preserved. They paid particular attention to cell phone records. A review of the data from July 24, 2015, confirmed that both devices were active in the Eagle Falls Trail area. At 6:15 p.m., Madison's phone recorded its last connection to a cell tower, and at 7:20 p.m., the signal from Ashley's phone disappeared completely. This indisputably proved that the girls were near the lake at the specified time, but offered no explanation for what happened next. Investigators also launched a large-scale review of video archives. Most of the surveillance camera footage along Highway 89 from 2015 was unavailable. Some systems were down due to technical malfunctions, and most private businesses had deleted the data due to automatic server purges. It seemed that time had destroyed most of the visual evidence. However, one important video recording was eventually discovered. The owner of a small roadside store located 2 miles from the start of the hiking trail had kept a backup hard drive containing footage from the last week of July 2015. The video quality was poor due to nighttime filming. The drivers' faces remained blurred, and the license plate numbers were illegible. However, during a frame-by-frame analysis of the footage from July 24th at 7:40 p.m., investigators noticed a detail that had not previously appeared in the case files. An old dark truck with a distinctive high cargo bed had been parked on the side of the road near the exit to the old pier for quite some time. This vehicle was not listed among the vehicles checked by the police during the initial search. The footage showed that the truck had been near the turn for at least 14 minutes, after which it slowly drove off toward the dirt road leading to the lakeshore. For the detectives, this was the first significant new lead. At the same time, investigators began re-interviewing people who had been near the lake on the day the girls disappeared. Among them was a local resident who had already given a statement to the police in 2015. During his first interview, the man stated that around 6 p.m. he had seen only the 2 girls sitting quietly at the edge of the old pier. At the time, his testimony seemed comprehensive and raised no suspicions. However, on August 22, 2018, detectives conducted a follow-up interview with him at the sheriff's department. The witness initially stuck to his previous account, noting that he could not recall any additional details due to the long time that had passed since the events. He repeated that he had simply been walking along the shore and had seen Madison and Ashley from a distance. When detectives asked more specific questions about transportation and bystanders, showing him a frame from the video footage featuring an old truck, the man's demeanor changed. According to the interrogation transcript, the witness became noticeably flustered and admitted that he had not told the whole story earlier because he was afraid of being drawn into a criminal investigation. The witness said that the girls were not alone near the old pier that evening. According to his new account, a middle-aged man wearing a dark jacket and sturdy work boots was standing nearby. The man was standing next to an old truck parked at the edge of the woods. The witness emphasized that he heard raised voices and a tense conversation between the girls and this man. However, due to the distance, he was unable to make out the content of their words and hurried to leave the coastal area. This new testimony marked the first major breakthrough in the investigation in 3 years. Now investigators had at their disposal not only Madison's remains and the abandoned vehicle in the parking lot, but also a description of the girls' possible deliberate contact with an unknown individual shortly before their disappearance. A logical question arose for the detectives. Why had this person never contacted the police, and why had the information about the truck only come to light now? Investigators began compiling a list of all local residents, tenants, and employees who, in 2015, had official or unofficial access to the area near the old pier and the surrounding wooded areas. All the leads they gathered began to converge on one specific location, which had previously been considered nothing more than a submerged ruin, an old fishing shack by the water where Madison Bennett's remains were found 3 years later. The detectives decided to investigate in detail exactly who had used this structure before it was flooded and who might have owned the dark-colored vehicle spotted by a witness. New testimony regarding a heated altercation near the old pier and the appearance of a dark pickup truck forced the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department investigation team to radically change its approach to the case. All previous theories, such as an accidental fall into the water or getting lost on a hiking trail, were definitively pushed to the background. Detectives focused on a specific location, an old fishing structure near whose support piles Madison Bennett's remains were found. At first glance, this wooden structure in the shallow waters of Emerald Bay appeared to be an ordinary abandoned piece of coastal infrastructure. For many years, the shack had virtually no official property status. Records from the local land registry office indicated that it had changed hands several times as far back as the 1990s. However, an on-site inspection revealed that a fairly large group of people actually had access to this area. For a long time, local fishermen, private boat owners, and vacationers had been using the structure freely to store tools, fishing gear, fuel, and navigation equipment. It was precisely this fact that posed significant challenges for the investigation. The mere fact that Madison's remains were found beneath the hut's structures did not provide direct grounds for asserting that the crime had been committed inside that structure. However, the detectives were interested in a specific question. Who exactly had the keys, regular access, and was in the vicinity of the site in the evening hours of July 24, 2015? While analyzing archival records, lists of local boat owners, and private vehicle registration records, investigators turned their attention to 52-year-old Thomas Grayson. The man had lived in the South Lake Tahoe suburbs for many years and worked as a boat engine maintenance and repair technician. In the initial interviews with neighbors and colleagues, Grayson was described as an extremely reserved and aloof person who avoided prolonged contact with others and preferred a solitary lifestyle. The mere fact of his professional activity or knowledge of the area could not serve as evidence of his involvement in the crime. However, a review of police patrol records revealed an important detail. Thomas Grayson had been using this particular fishing cabin regularly for a long time. He used it as a private workshop and storage area for spare parts, lubricants, and heavy fishing gear. Thomas's 25-year-old son, Ethan Grayson, would periodically appear in the area with him. Unlike his father, Ethan had a very different reputation in the local community. Family acquaintances described him during interviews as a person with heightened emotional instability and a tendency toward impulsive behavior. He had repeatedly gotten into domestic disputes with coastal residents, and his relationship with his father remained strained due to Thomas's constant desire to exercise total control over his adult son's activities. Given these circumstances, investigators decided to thoroughly examine whether Thomas and Ethan Grayson might have been near Emerald Bay on the day the girls disappeared. On August 25, 2018, detectives conducted an initial interview with Thomas Grayson at his residence. During this conversation, the man immediately admitted that for many years he had indeed used an old fishing cabin for his own purposes. However, when the conversation turned to the evening of July 24, 2015, his answers became vague. Thomas stated on the record that he could not recall the exact details of his movements from 3 years prior, had never met Madison Bennett or Ashley Mills, and categorically denied any connection to their disappearance. At first, such a response might have seemed logical, since it is difficult for an ordinary person to reconstruct the events of a specific day from 3 years ago. However, investigators were alarmed by a discrepancy regarding the vehicle. When the detective asked a direct question about the dark truck spotted by a witness near the turn to the pier, Thomas initially flatly denied that his Ford could have been there. However, after being shown surveillance footage from a roadside store, the man changed his testimony and admitted that his truck could indeed have been parked near the lake that evening. This was not proof of guilt, but it created the first serious contradiction in Thomas Grayson's testimony. A person who had not previously been involved in the investigation was now concealing the fact of his presence at the scene of the possible crime. On August 28, 2018, the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office approved a warrant for a detailed search of the area around the old cabin and the structure itself. Using specialized equipment, the forensic team examined the wooden frame, the partially submerged floor, and the remains of fishing gear and equipment stored inside. No direct physical evidence, such as the murder weapon or Madison and Ashley's personal belongings, was found during the initial examination. However, forensic experts collected several samples of synthetic materials from fishing nets, ropes, and wooden paneling that showed signs of mechanical damage. The experts also noted specific deposits on the interior walls of the cabin. All collected samples were sent to the state laboratory for analysis. Detectives had identified an important lead in the investigation. They had a specific individual who had access to the site where the remains were found, drove a truck similar to the one seen by the witness, and gave contradictory statements during questioning. However, the main questions remained unanswered. Why did Thomas Grayson conceal the fact that he had been at the lake on July 24, 2015, and exactly what events took place inside the old cabin on that fateful night? After conducting a detailed search of the area around the old fishing cabin and uncovering inconsistencies regarding the vehicle, Thomas Grayson's name was officially added to the list of individuals subject to further investigation. Investigators from the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department were well aware that suspicions alone do not constitute sufficient evidence for an indictment. The fact that Thomas knew the lakeside area very well, had regularly used the cabin for many years to store his tools, and did not immediately disclose his presence at the lake on the evening of July 24, 2015, could have various explanations. The man might have been deliberately concealing a crime, or he might simply have been afraid of being implicated in the investigation of such a complex and high-profile case. The detective's main task was not to make impulsive accusations, but to uncover exactly which facts Thomas had tried to conceal during the initial interviews. On September 1, 2018, at 10 a.m., Thomas Grayson was summoned once again to the interrogation room of the Major Crimes Unit at the South Lake Tahoe Sheriff's Department. His behavior immediately caught the attention of the investigators and the criminal psychologist present. The man did not appear frightened at all. He did not behave like someone who had been caught off guard, and he tried to project complete calm and an inner willingness to cooperate with the police. According to the official transcript of the interrogation, Thomas repeated several times from the very beginning of the conversation that he sincerely sympathized with the families of the deceased girls, was eager to help law enforcement establish the truth, and was also waiting for answers. However, the detectives analyzed not only his general statements, but also his psychophysiological reactions at the moments when the conversation approached specific time intervals of that fateful evening. When questions concerned the general circumstances of his life near Lake Tahoe, Thomas answered confidently and without any hesitation. He described in detail how often he was by the water, exactly where he stored his boat parts, what tools he kept in his cabin, and the specific routes he usually took in his truck. However, as soon as the investigators turned to the events between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock p.m. on July 24, 2015, his memory suddenly became fragmented and vague. He stated on the record that over the course of 3 years, he had completely forgotten the exact times of his movements, could not recall whether he had gone to the old pier that evening, and did not provide a clear explanation as to why his dark Ford truck had been seen near the exit to the coastal area. Investigators noted this as an important psychological indicator. The man selectively demonstrated a good memory for general facts that suited him, but completely lost the details at critically important points in time. In the second half of the interrogation, the detectives decided to change their tactics. They refrained from asking direct questions, did not mention the video footage they had, and gave Thomas the opportunity to present his own continuous account of the events of that evening. It was during this free-flowing account that new contradictions began to emerge in his story. At first, the man claimed that on July 24, 2015, he had not entered the Emerald Bay area at all. However, just 20 minutes into the conversation, he mentioned that he might have stopped briefly near a fishing shack to pick up some necessary tools. Thomas then noted that he might have heard some voices coming from the pier, but hadn't paid any attention to them. He was never able to explain why these details hadn't been mentioned in 2015 during the initial interviews. Each subsequent statement created further discrepancies with his previous statements. The turning point in the interrogation came at 1:15 p.m. when one of the detectives mentioned the name of Thomas's son, 25-year-old Ethan Grayson, for the first time. Up until that moment, Thomas had remained emphatically reserved and measured. However, as soon as his son's name was mentioned, his demeanor changed dramatically. According to the video recording of the interrogation, the man leaned forward, sat up straight, and declared in a raised voice that his son had nothing to do with the case. He made this statement even before the investigators had asked any direct questions regarding Ethan's possible involvement or his whereabouts that evening. Such a premature and emotional defensive reaction aroused serious suspicions among the detectives. The father's behavior clearly indicated that he was instinctively trying to divert law enforcement's attention away from his son. After 5 hours of continuous questioning, the interrogation was fully concluded. Thomas Grayson did not make a direct confession, did not describe the circumstances of Madison Bennett's death, did not provide information about Ashley Mills's whereabouts, and denied being near the pier at the time of the altercation. However, the results of the interrogation revealed to investigators the existence of a hidden layer of information that Thomas was deliberately trying to shield from public scrutiny. The detectives formed a firm conviction that Thomas Grayson's silence and contradictions were linked not so much to his own actions as to an attempt to cover for his son. On September 2, 2018, the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office issued an official subpoena for a separate interview with Ethan Grayson. The investigative team was faced with a new and important task: to determine exactly where Ethan had been on the evening of July 24, 2015, and whether he could have been directly involved in the events at Lake Tahoe that led to the death of Madison Bennett and the disappearance of Ashley Mills. After re-interviewing Thomas Grayson and analyzing his pronounced emotional reaction when recalling his son, the investigation team from the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department's Major Crimes Unit began, for the first time, to view the case not as an isolated crime committed by a single individual. In all the years prior, law enforcement's primary focus had been on finding a specific, lone individual who had access to the old fishing shack and might have been present on the shore on the night the girls disappeared. However, Thomas's behavior significantly shifted the investigation's priorities. His contradictory statements and selective memory lapses indicated not only a desire to avoid personal responsibility, but also a deliberate attempt to shield a loved one from the detective's scrutiny. That person's name is Ethan Grayson. Thomas's 25-year-old son was virtually absent from the official case files regarding the disappearances in 2015. At that time, the police had no reason to consider him a key figure, as he was listed only as one of many local residents who periodically appeared in the Emerald Bay area. However, after the discovery of Madison Bennett's remains under the support beams of the cabin and the emergence of new information about an old dark truck, the circumstances surrounding this family changed dramatically. On September 2, 2018, at 2 p.m., Ethan Grayson was summoned for a private interview at the Sheriff's Department in South Lake Tahoe. The detectives deliberately conducted the interview in complete isolation from his father to prevent him from coordinating answers, altering facts, or exerting external psychological control. Investigators sought to thoroughly compare the chronology of events on July 24, 2015, as recounted by both men during their separate interviews. According to the official interrogation transcript and the video recording, Ethan's behavior differed significantly from Thomas's reserved, cold, and measured demeanor. While his father tried to carefully weigh every word and control his emotions, Ethan appeared extremely tense, constantly shifting his position in the chair, speaking at a rapid pace, and actively making excuses. He emotionally emphasized to the detectives several times that he did not understand the grounds for being summoned to the police again 3 years after those events. Ethan stated on record that he had never personally known Madison Bennett or Ashley Mills, had had no contact with them or any conflicts with them, and categorically denied being near the old pier on the evening of July 24, 2015. He insisted that he had been in a completely different part of town that evening. However, during a detailed interrogation, he was unable to name any witnesses or provide any documents or receipts that could officially confirm his alibi. Upon a detailed comparison of Thomas's and Ethan's interrogation transcripts, investigators discovered serious and significant discrepancies. During his initial interview, Thomas claimed that his son had been with him near the workshop that evening, helping to repair a boat engine. Ethan, however, stated during his interrogation that he had not seen his father at all after 5 p.m. that day and had spent the entire time on his own. There were also clear contradictions regarding the use of a dark Ford pickup truck. Thomas claimed that only he had the keys to the vehicle, while Ethan admitted that he regularly used his father's car without asking permission, including for trips to the lakeshore area of Lake Tahoe. After analyzing the evidence gathered, the investigative team formulated 3 main working theories. The first theory suggested that Ethan Grayson himself might have been the one to initiate the conflict near the old pier. According to this hypothesis, he might have accidentally run into Madison and Ashley. A sudden argument broke out between them, which escalated into violence, and Thomas later joined in to cover up the evidence and hide the body. The second version identified Thomas himself as the instigator of the events, as he knew the isolated areas of the coastal zone very well and frequently used the fishing shack. Under this version, Ethan could have acted only as a witness or an accomplice who helped transport or conceal physical evidence. The third version posited the joint involvement of both men, who acted in concert from the very beginning and deliberately maintained a strict policy of silence for 3 years. However, the main mystery of the case remained for investigators: the complete absence of any traces of Ashley Mills. The results of a re-examination of the bottom and structures of the old cabin by a diving team confirmed that the remains of the second girl were not present at that location. Law enforcement officials began an in-depth investigation of all possible routes taken by the Graysons' truck on the night of her disappearance. Detectives analyzed data from cell towers and reviewed archived patrol logs for forested areas outside standard hiking trails. They paid particular attention to isolated sections of the El Dorado National Forest, where random passersby were virtually non-existent. Despite the lack of a direct confession during Ethan Grayson's interrogation, investigators gained a key understanding of the structure of this crime. The combination of facts, the presence of the truck near the exit, the discovery of the body under the cabin, and the contradictions in the father's and son's statements, pointed to a premeditated cover-up. To file formal charges, the detective division lacked the key piece of evidence that could shed light on the fate of the second victim, Ashley Mills. After completing separate interviews with Thomas and Ethan Grayson, during which investigators uncovered significant and fundamental discrepancies in their statements, the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department could no longer ignore the possible connection between this family and the events of July 2015. However, operational suspicions and psychological indicators alone could not serve as a sufficient legal basis for filing formal charges and bringing the case to court. The investigation required irrefutable physical evidence and an answer to the key question that had remained unanswered throughout the entire investigation: what exactly happened to 22-year-old Ashley Mills? Without determining the fate of the second girl, the case file remained incomplete. One victim had been found in shallow water, but the second friend was still considered missing. Investigators began an in-depth and detailed analysis of all possible routes taken by the Ford vehicle belonging to the Grayson family on the night of July 24th to 25th, 2015. Detectives retrieved old satellite monitoring records, cell phone location data, footage from roadside surveillance cameras, and re-interviewed residents of remote farmsteads and the surrounding areas. The task force's attention was particularly drawn to an isolated area off the main tourist routes, an abandoned granite quarry near the Rock Creek district. According to official documents, industrial operations were once carried out there, but over time the area became completely abandoned. Deep soil depressions, dense coniferous forests, and extremely rugged mountainous terrain made this location ideal for someone intent on concealing any physical evidence of a crime. The search operation in the area of the abandoned Rock Creek Quarry began on September 10, 2018, and lasted more than 4 days. More than 60 people were involved in the large-scale search efforts. Sheriff's Department personnel, K-9 units with specially trained search dogs, a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging technology, and divers from the forensic unit. The divers thoroughly searched the flooded construction pits and small bodies of water at the bottom of the quarry, while forensic investigators examined all possible dirt access roads that Ethan's or Thomas's car might have traveled on that fateful evening. However, the results of these lengthy and grueling searches proved to be entirely inconclusive. No skeletal remains, fragments of clothing, or personal belongings belonging to Ashley Mills were found in the Rock Creek area. Her cell phone was never detected by cell tower records, and no biological or physical evidence was found on the ground that would definitively explain her fate. For Ashley's family, this outcome was yet another devastating psychological blow. They were left with new questions, but still had no certainty whatsoever regarding their daughter's whereabouts. Despite the setback, it was during this operation that the investigative team received the long-awaited results of the forensic analyses. Specialists at the State Forensic Medical Laboratory in Sacramento completed an in-depth analysis of samples collected from an old fishing shack near Emerald Bay. These findings radically altered the evidence base and the legal stance of the entire investigation. According to the official expert report dated September 14, 2018, microscopic biological traces were detected on fragments of the cabin's wooden floorboards and lower support beams. DNA analysis confirmed that they matched Madison Bennett's genetic profile exactly. In addition, textile experts determined that the synthetic fabric fibers recovered from Thomas Grayson's fishing gear fully matched in composition, dyeing, and weave structure the material of the clothing Madison was wearing at the time of her disappearance. This evidence did more than simply confirm the girl's presence in the coastal area. It unequivocally showed that she had been inside the fishing structure, a location regarding which Thomas Grayson had previously given contradictory testimony and categorically denied his presence. Furthermore, a comparative analysis of the father's and son's interviews revealed that their accounts of the events did not merely differ in detail, but directly contradicted one another. Thomas sought to downplay his own role in the events of that evening, while Ethan tried to prove that he had not been near the lake at all. However, the physical evidence, the 3-year silence, and the coincidence of circumstances painted a picture that could no longer be explained away as a coincidence. Based on the collected evidence, laboratory analyses, and interrogation transcripts, which revealed clear contradictions in the father and son's testimonies, the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office had sufficient legal grounds to refer the case to court. On September 18, 2018, the prosecutor officially filed an indictment. Thomas and Ethan Grayson were formally charged with involvement in the death of Madison Bennett, unlawful deprivation of liberty, and willful concealment of the circumstances of a serious crime. The trial was set to be the next decisive stage in the case. However, even after the charges were filed, the main question remained unanswered. Where was Ashley Mills? Madison's family had the opportunity to say goodbye to their daughter, while Ashley's parents were still waiting for the moment when they would learn the truth about her fate. And that moment never came for them. In November 2018, the public trial of Thomas and Ethan Grayson began in El Dorado County District Court. For the Madison Bennett family, this formal hearing was the moment they had been waiting for over 3 long and difficult years. 3 years of utter uncertainty, exhausting daily searches, thousands of missing person flyers distributed, and a complete lack of even the slightest clear answers from law enforcement. 3 years during which the parents had no idea what had actually happened to their daughter near Lake Tahoe. Now they hope to finally hear a complete legal and factual assessment of those fateful events. However, for Ashley Mills' family, this process remained yet another profound and extremely painful ordeal. as one part of this tragic story reached a legal conclusion while the other remained completely hidden from the public. During the trial, the prosecution built its compelling case not on a single piece of evidence, but on a combination of numerous, mutually corroborating circumstances. The prosecutors presented the jury with a detailed chronology of events. In 2015, witnesses last saw Madison and Ashley near the old pier at Emerald Bay. A dark Ford pickup truck belonging to the Graysons had been parked near the site of their disappearance for a long time. 3 years later, Madison's remains were discovered beneath a flooded fishing shack that Thomas had regularly used, and repeated forensic examinations revealed the girl's DNA and fibers from her clothing directly inside that structure. In their closing arguments, the defendant's attorneys insisted on a fundamentally different version of events. The defense emphasized that the evidence presented by the prosecution did not provide a complete picture and consisted only of circumstantial evidence. They argued that the mere fact of using the fishing cabin, familiarity with the coastal area, or the presence of a car near the lake during the summer does not constitute automatic and indisputable proof of an intentional crime. The defense attorneys argued to the jury that the DNA traces could have ended up in the cabin earlier, and that witness testimony given 3 years after the events was not a completely reliable source of information. However, what was decisive for the jury was not any single fact, but rather a logical and continuous chain of events that could no longer be attributed to a mere coincidence. During the trial, particular attention was paid to Thomas Grayson's behavior following the girl's disappearance in 2015. Prosecutors presented testimony from investigators confirming that Thomas had not merely withheld important details from the police, but had deliberately concealed the fact that he may have been near the pier on that fateful evening. The prosecution also analyzed in detail Thomas's reaction during his formal interrogation at the sheriff's department. Particular emphasis was placed on the audio recording of the session when the detective first mentioned the name of his son, Ethan. A psychological analysis of this reaction revealed the obvious. Thomas began emotionally defending Ethan and asserting his son's innocence even before investigators asked any specific questions about his movements or his son's possible role in the crime. After several weeks of hearings and lengthy deliberations in the jury room, the jury announced its official verdict. Thomas and Ethan Grayson were found guilty of involvement in the death of Madison Bennett, unlawful imprisonment, and willful concealment of the circumstances of the crime. The court sentenced them to lengthy prison terms in a California state penitentiary. For Madison's family, this court ruling could not bring their daughter back or ease the pain of their loss. However, it gave them what they had been denied for 3 years, an official affirmation of justice and answers to their most pressing questions. They finally received legal confirmation that Madison's death was not an unexplained accident and that her story did not remain a cold case in the archives with no one held accountable. However, there was another side to this case that never reached a conclusion: the fate of Ashley Mills. Despite the sentencing and the conclusion of the trial, Ashley's whereabouts and the circumstances of her disappearance remained completely unclear. Her parents were unable to hold a funeral, had no place to go to pay their respects, and never received a clear account of what happened to their daughter after 6 p.m. on July 24, 2015. For the Mills family, this story did not end when the courtroom doors closed. It continued to live on in their memory as the single agonizing question of where Ashley was. Years later, the investigation into the cases of Madison Bennett and Ashley Mills became part of forensic science textbooks as a stark reminder of the extraordinary complexity of missing persons cases in remote mountainous terrain. Sometimes the truth does not come to light immediately, requiring years of persistent work, the development of new technologies, and a detailed re-examination of even the smallest pieces of physical evidence. And sometimes, even after an official court verdict, part of the truth remains forever at the bottom of a lake, leaving behind unanswered questions. Madison Bennett's family was finally able to find closure and honor their daughter's memory. For Ashley Mills and her loved ones, however, that closure has yet to come. For while one story has reached its final conclusion in the courtroom, another remains a silent mystery, still awaiting its final chapter.